Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't been here before, my name is Tracy and this is a DIY upcycling channel. And recently I posted a video of over 60 of my extreme upcycles and you voted for your favorite, and this lace duster was #1, and that's what we're making today. The main component of this duster is going to be a top that is kind of lacy or crochet, has some texture and almost little holes. I wouldn't do anything geometric, maybe try to find more traditional patterns and some sort of lace. I have a tablecloth, but you could use lace curtains from the thrift store. I did dye this to match. It's about perfect. Great match. I used these 4 colors. 2 drips, I would say, of each one except for the orange. I used a teeny tiny bit of the orange, not nearly as much as I did the other colors, and it came out wonderfully. But I want to talk a second about matching your colors because it's going to be almost impossible, and even dyeing can be iffy. But I'm going to show you some projects. You know, I don't want you not being able to match color, like have the same top, the same color as the tablecloth, to stop you from doing this project, because almost everything I do is like whites and off-white and ecru all mixed together when I create sort of lacy things. And I think it's beautiful and magical. I'll link these. These are all tutorials down in my description. This too. And even the pants I'm wearing. So don't let not having all matching colors stop you. Let's dig into it. By the way, I have lots of Rit dye tutorials. I'll link a good one down in my description. I got a little lipstick on there. If you see that spot, it's going to dry. I had to try to wash that off. So I'm going to do some cropping to begin with. And I want this shirt to be 16 inches from the top to about here. So that means I have to cut 7 inches off. So I'm just taking my tailor's chalk and a ruler, going around and making my marks. Now I'm going to follow my dash marks and cut the bottom off. Now I want to cut some of the sleeves off. So I'm going to fold my top in half and line those sleeves up nicely. Now from this shoulder seam down, I'm going to measure 9 inches and cut straight across. I'm cutting both sleeves at the same time. Now I don't want buttons on mine. It's going to be more of a kimono with no closures. I will be adding stuff right here, so I'm going to remove these beautiful little mother of pearl buttons and save them for another project. Here's the shape that we have now. So at this point, if you want to do something that I did with the original duster that I'm not going to do on this one, now would be the time. The original duster had more of a simple cardigan. It didn't have a lot of texture and interest like this one does. So what I did, so that that wasn't plain, is I took a doily like this with the 3D flowers, and I cut those flowers out. And I sewed them just onto the cardigan part, you know, not a ton, but just enough to give it a little extra interest. But this one has enough going on. I'm not going to do that. I want to add the bottom part now, but before I do, I want to hem this a little so that it's clean and no raw edge on the inside. I'm at the bottom of my shirt and I'm looking at the right side. I am going to fold this over once, 1/4 of an inch on the outside, right sides together, and run a straight stitch along it. And that's it. Okay. I want my finished duster to be almost to the floor. So I measured another one that I have that I like the length. And from the shoulder seam down, 50 inches is what I want mine to be from here down. So we already have 16 inches. And then I'm going to have 4-inch fringe at the bottom. So I need this piece to be 30 inches tall. So the 16 plus the 30 is 46, plus the 4-inch fringe equals my 50. That's how I got my measurement for this. All right, so my tablecloth is 101 inches long and 66 inches tall. My perimeter around the bottom of the top is 44 inches. I want this to be at least double that, so 88 inches. Well, I have 101. I'm just going to cut straight across the bottom, keep that nice finished seam from the bottom up 30 inches. Here's my top. I have it spread open. Here's the bottom. And I'm looking at the right side. I'm going to sew this on top of the right side of the top. I have an abundance of this lace, so I don't need to do any pinning. I know I'm going to have plenty, so I can just pleat without pinning or anything. I'm going to take this and start at the corner, overlap 1/2 inch, and I will do quite a bit of pleating on this one. I'd say, like I always say, I always feel this out at the machine, maybe every 1.5 inches, fold it over on itself about 1/2 inch, and I will just pleat and sew until I get all the way back around. And I'll have extra, I'll just trim that off when I get back. And I'll be using a zigzag stitch. Now here's where I attached that curtain, or that tablecloth. And the inside is nice and clean without raw edges because we did that hem, but we still have a raw edge here. I have some vintage kind of lace that looks like this. I think it is about 3/4 inch tall. And now I'm going to sew it over top of our raw edge, just wherever I think it will hide the stitch and the raw edge, and I will use a zigzag stitch. Okay, so now I want to work on the sleeve, and I want a flared sleeve, and I want the total length of it to be 23 inches from the shoulder seam down. And what I did was just took a yardstick, looked in the mirror, held it to my shoulder seam, and just kind of guesstimated where I wanted to end on my hand, and I got 23 inches. So I'm going to give you a close-up of this pattern, but it is 10 inches tall, and I just want to show you how I got that number. So we have 9 inches here, plus the 10 inches gives me 19, plus I want 4-inch fringe, it gives me the 23-inch length that I want. So my pattern looks like this. And I just explained the 10 inches tall. The 24.5 inches across is a number I pulled out of my hat. That's just about how wide I think I want the sleeves. And it's 7.5 inches across here. And how I got that number is I took a ruler, measured it straight across, not the circumference, and that's 6.5 inches. I added 1 inch for seam allowance, 1/2 inch on each side. So that gave me 7.5 inches. I laid out what was left of the tablecloth, and I'm going to trace out 4 of these. And I'm staying right at the bottom finished edge. That's one less raw edge that I have to deal with. And I'm going to trace and cut out 4 of these. I have my 4 pieces cut out. This will be for one arm and this will be for the other arm. What I'm going to do is go to my machine and right sides together. If there is a right side, I am going to sew just the outside edges, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll trim that with my pinking shears. And I will be using a straight stitch so my seam isn't all weird. I like to start at the bottom and then I'll trim it at the top, more narrow part, if things get kind of wonky here. To sew this lace, you'll want to put your tension on a lower number. I typically have mine about here, but I'm going down to 2. Now I'm trimming those seam allowances with my pinking shears. I turn the sleeves right side out and I'm pressing those seams. Now I want to add the sleeves to the duster. I want my seam, when I sew these together, on the inside to be finished and clean. So what I have to do is sew wrong sides together. I have my duster inside out. I'm looking at the wrong side. I have my sleeve right side out. And now I'm going to slide my sleeve inside this piece. Since this is right side out, the wrong side is touching the wrong side of this. And I am going to find one of the seams that I made on, I'm calling it a triangle, even though it's not a true triangle. And then the underneath seam of the duster, and this is important because when you sew 2 triangles like this together, they don't have a perfectly symmetrical round shape once you sew them on. It'll be, well, I'll show you when I get it sewn. So lining up a seam and a seam is important to get both sides exactly the same. And now the rest I can just pin on. This should fit in there nicely. Now I have both my sleeves pinned. I'm going to sew all the way around, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I have it right side out again. There's the seam we just made. I'm pressing it so that it faces down towards the bottom of the sleeve. I want to show you the interesting shape those triangles take on. It's almost like a square. And that's why it's important to line up those seams, because it's not perfectly round at the bottom like some sleeves, but very cool. Now we still got that raw seam on the outside. I'm taking that same lace that I trimmed the waist area with, and I'm going to trim that out. Now what I want to do is add some fringe to the arms and 2 rows at the bottom. And I'm using off-white 4-inch chainette fringe. I got this on eBay. She didn't have any more. She was just selling this bolt at 11 yards. But, you know, you can find that probably pretty easily on eBay if you want the exact same kind of fringe. All right, I'm gonna do the arms first and then the bottom. This is really simple. I'm starting at the underneath seam because that seems where it'll be most hidden, where I start and stop. And I'll start here, overlap about 1/4 inch, use a zigzag stitch, sew all the way around. Oops. And then when I get back to where I started, I'll just fold that over a little bit so that it's a nice clean edge. There's There's the arms, so pretty. Now I want to sew 2 rows of fringe at the bottom. One will be 7 inches up, and that'll be the first one I do. And then the second one will be right at the very bottom, 1/2 inch up. Going to measure up 7 inches and make little dashes all the way across, and that will be my guideline for sewing the fringe. The fringe is all sewn, and I used 6 yards of fringe for this. Now I want to decorate the front, trim out those 2 front pieces. I'm going to use doilies, lace, and crochet to decorate the front of that. And I went to my stash and I picked out some pieces, and they vary in shade. The main thing I looked for is something that's sort of thin and flowy. I tried not to find anything stiff. Now I want to cut these into scrappy little pieces, and I'm going to use my Pink Power electric scissors. I wish I would have had these long ago because I've had tendonitis surgery from all of my cutting, and I highly recommend it if you cut a lot, especially if you sell and you're sewing every day. I perfected this little technique back when I sold, and it's kind of hard to explain the shape that I'm cutting, but each piece, they'll vary in size, maybe about 4 to 6 inches long, and each one will have some sort of curve to it. So something like that. But they won't all be the same. Some will be skinny, some will be fat. Just odd little pieces. And I'm going to cut up a bunch of these until I feel I can eyeball it and think I'll have enough to do the duster with. Okay, I'm going to start with a pile about like that. If I need more, I'll cut more. Now to sew these on. Here is one of the front sides of my duster. I will sort of alternate these colors, and I will sew like on a piece this size from about where my thumb is here to about here. I will lay these facing, this one's kind of dirty, but I don't care, facing the outside of that edge, and I will sew a small amount. And then I'll tuck that down, grab another piece, a piece like this. I might sew from here to here. So I'll butt that up against there, overlapping about 1/2 inch using a zigzag stitch. And I will just continue doing that all the way around until I'm done. Okay, I want to show you this. I'm almost all the way up one side. This is the neckline, the collar, and everything has been facing out. Now, when I do the collar, I'll do that a little differently, and I'll get there and I'll show you what I do. So the collar, I don't want things facing this way because it will fall down into my duster. So I want the neckline only. I will do the same technique, only I will have the lace laying down on the duster. Okay, it is all sewn. I'm going to go put it on, show you what it looks like so that you can see the beautiful movement that it has too. So beautiful, and it really was not that hard. It's just knowing what steps to take to get you there. And I'm going to slow it down so you can see the details better. Just so comfy and flowy and gorgeous. I want to say two things. I want to talk about two questions I always get when I cut doilies and I make something out of lace. Number one question, don't those doilies completely unravel? Some people insist that they do. And it's a good question. If I hadn't made literally hundreds of items using doilies and cut lace, I wouldn't be sure either, but they do not unravel, surprisingly. They will fray around the edges when you wash them, but that's a soft, beautiful look. It gets rid of sort of any cut lines. They do not unravel. Second question is, how are you going to launder something like this? I would say, with the delicacy of the lace and the fringe and everything, and I don't think I've ever said on this channel to dry clean something, but you might want to consider professionally cleaning this. With that being said, I rarely do that. And so I would probably risk it and put it in my wash machine on a delicate, gentle cycle, cold water. And a lot of people have mentioned garment bags on this channel. I've never had one, but that might be a good idea too. And line dry. Okay, I'm going to bring it in and let you see more of the details. And I thank you so much for watching.